Hey guys, this is Patrick Carter. You might know me as the guy with the most IM medals in the world, or something like that. I'm also the CGO of Fnatic, and you're watching Duncan Thorin Shields YouTube channel.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Snake and Banter, which means obviously me and Mauisnake are back. Our guest for this one is going to be someone that, quite frankly, none of you are going to know because he's pretty new to the content creation space. It's a guy here called Paladin, and the way I became aware of him was just, if people don't know, I watch almost any type of content out there if the premise is interesting. Like, I'll give a lot of stuff a go because you never know actually who's watching the demos, who's doing the work, and who isn't. So one of the things is Paladin here has a YouTube account, which I'll obviously put in the description box below, where he's done a few videos that are analytical videos. The one I saw was one where it was about how good Perfecto is at staying alive, which if you've heard any of my content for the last sort of month and a half, that's one of the main things I stress about, why I actually think he's kind of like a better player than the numbers show on the stats page, for Na'Vi. I also noticed you had one, I forget which player it was. It was a similar story. It was Intus from Gambit. Similar story. He's obviously trying to pick players that, the stats don't jump off the page, but they're doing something valuable within the team. I'll point out, by the way, if people have never followed my content, this is actually a reliable way to make inroads into the esports industry. It's just make content off your own initiative. Because in doing so, you can show people you have a mind for the game, or you're interested, or you seem like you follow it, etc. The one thing I'll say is, though, the one area that can fuck you is, listen, I'm petty enough, I'll just do a Twitter search. So if you've ever talked shit about me on Twitter, that will 100% limit you ever being on any of my content. But the reason I bring this up, though, is because people don't know. Actually, a lot of people, I always forget people don't realise this because they only know shit from recently. But Mauisnake himself literally got his start a similar way. He did a bunch of YouTube content where he was analysing games and all the rest of it in a different way to other people. And what happened was, this is years ago now, it was in 2017, I think. I did an advert where basically I said I was going to hire some people to be research assistants for me. And he won't know this himself, but that's one of the factors is the people I selected were the people where they took initiative at each step. So for example, when they wrote me the email, they didn't just say, I'm this guy and I'd like to, they gave here's the reasons why. So I've done, he linked to his channel that had all the content already there. By the way, that's a massive advantage for the industry. Is if you already have the content, because the thing is, the other people think they can just tell you what they're going to do. Oh no, but I would do X, Y, and Z. It's if it's just there, I don't need to believe you. I can go watch it. So anyway, I would say if you think either of those topics are interesting, Perfecto and Na'Vi, Intus and Gambit, go watch those videos. You're probably quite interested. They're probably better than you expect. Right, for this episode, Paladin, on this show...
A couple things I gotta jump in on, though.
Yeah, go on.
For that, one, I did shit talk you on Twitter, actually, but I did it on an alt account that I don't really use anymore, but it was about some take you had on Russell Westbrook, and you actually blocked me for a week on that account. I think you were saying something about how Westbrook's stats were just super inflated, and I just pounced on it. But I mean, you don't know that. You didn't know that it was me. So
you're the one who got away with it then, mate.
I did get away with it. And also another thing is that in the email, I remember I said to you that you'll just save so much time if you just get me. So that was kind of my attention grabber. So
right. By the way. Yeah. There's nothing we can do about Mauisnake's mic, because for some reason now when you talk, it's a little bit dodgy, but whatever. We'll just do what we can with this episode, right? Paladin, what we always do on this show, when we do the good, bad, ugly format is, we always make the guest start first, so it's like an instant icebreaker. So obviously we start with the good, we start with a positive aspect. What did you pick as your good topic for this one?
First of all, super glad to be here. The one that I picked was Alex and Mezzi going to Fnatic. Personally, I think that the motivation is super lacking on the Fnatic squad. Bad result after bad result. It was pretty clear change had to happen. And benching JW and Golden, I think, was the right decision. But a harder decision is who to bring in. I know there's a lot of free agents on the block right now. And I think that Alex and Mezzi is the perfect pair. You have two British people, so that helps a little bit with the cultural angle. And then the other great thing is that they've played together on Cloud9. And the last thing is Mezzi's been tearing it up and is very hungry to get back into the tier 1 space on endpoint. And I think that he'll just pair very well with Alex in the future at EPL.
Yeah, I think that Alex is the best IGL free agent right now. I think that you look at MSL and you look at Alex, and I particularly rate Alex higher right now. I think his individual level is better. I think that in terms of how he would work with the lineup, I think his system makes more sense for the personnel that are on Fnatic. I think the drastic shift from a golden system to an MSL system would have been big. And but a golden system to an Alex system, it's going to be a little smoother sailing for the Fnatic side. So I'm a huge fan of that. And everybody has been telling me that Mezzy is a player that I need to do a demo review on, but I've been doing some other stuff and haven't caught to him, but he has been just smashing it on endpoint. So I know that, and the people that I really do trust when they say that they've been watching those games have been saying that he has just been a hyper carry for them.
I would just say, like, he is a player where basically him and I always said this about the Cloud9 lineup. The only two players I don't put much blame on are Alex and Mezzy. Like, if you actually look at what their jobs were, and I'm not counting when Alex was a fucking AWPing, because that was just stupidity from the GM side of things. When you look just as an IGL and you look at Mezzy as a support player, they were actually pretty good at their roles, I have to say. Like, within the context of what they were working with, you look at the results. So I even think that's a good shout, by the way, for a demo to watch, because kind of in the same vein as Paladin here watched Perfecto on Na'Vi and Inters on Gambit, I think it's probably a player where I'll bet there's loads that, like, just don't show to a fan who's watching the highlights. Like, they're not going to be in the highlight end of the game. They're going to be more like setting up the structure, holding a position for a viewer. So it's nuanced stuff, but I could definitely believe it's legit. I think actually Mezzy, especially because people also forget this detail, which is brutal in the context of Cloud9. He was the one on the cheap contract. Why do people make out like everyone was on the Xantares contract? He was on a very, very reasonable contract, especially if you actually then look how he played and his results were. Like, it seemed to me, as far as I can tell, the guy did his fucking job. The Alex one obviously is a bit more of like the interesting angle in terms of, like, you know, what becomes of it. I agree with your point though, Mauisnake. Like, the problem is this. I believe in myself that, like, after how many years you've played, like, obviously I'm sure he has adapted and he knows how to mid-round to some extent. It's just not his main strength. And the problem I see in Fnatic is, like, it's the reason why, as far as I know, when they first brought Golden in, they basically kicked him out a few months later. Like, those players, especially, like, now it's only really Crims, but like when they had Crims and JW and Flusher, those players unfortunately had they were trapped in the prison of what their old success was, and they didn't want to play the game anywhere differently. So their old success, if you don't know, like, Flusher even said it when he was in Cloud9, when people asked him, what is Fnatic IGLing? He just said, you just do a default and then people do their own shit off it. And now you have to understand, if you have like the lineup he had in 2015, that's genius. Yeah. Let everyone just go and do amazing shit themselves. What I don't think he understood was, though, like, what if you have a team where the guys never played in tier 1 CSR, you never played that role before, or, you know, like we're playing against a team that's maybe doing the same thing and better. Like, there's no plan B, there's no plan C there. So the problem is, I could have seen like MSL being a good compromise, but if you just listen to like how Alex seems to think about the game, how his team he seems like a way better fit in that sense. Like, he seems more like the modern version of what they want, actually, mate. Like, it sounds to me like he wants a lot of control in the middle of a round as to what he does in the game. It sounds like he doesn't set up with some super complicated shit. He does do a lot of mid-round, as far as I can tell. So that all seems to make sense. That all lines up, I think. Nothing wrong with that. I think the whole MSLX thing, again, to me, it's more who's a better fit for the team. So who gives a fuck who's the better IGL? Like, it's not really even that relevant in this particular case. Right, okay then, let's do this. Yeah, keep going. If you got a point, bring it in.
Yeah, I will say, I think even Mezzy's stats have been incredible in the last 3 months or so. But I think beyond that, I feel like he is such a selfless teammate. I've been watching the way I watched a couple demos like before this, and he's very selfless. And then to put on top of that, he's also a very good aimer. And I think that's literally exactly what Fnatic need right now, because I think their core is very, very strong. Like Brolin and Crims, and I think Joaquinho has shown signs of really good opping. I think that core could work just beautifully with how Mezzy plays supportively as well.
Sure. Right, okay, let's go to yours then, Mauisnake. What was your good point?
My good is that it does feel like the community is beginning to discuss core mechanical changes a little bit more in depth, and I think that's something that could, I wouldn't say, change the game, spice it up a little bit. It just give us something new where, for example, I think the main conversation I'm referring to is that grenades may be able to get dropped in the future. The CSGO right. Twitter was teasing that, and so I think other people started talking about, oh yeah, why don't you also bring in the fact that you can buy only one M4? Like they should be able to allow you to
team,
buy.
You mean?
Yeah.
No, wait. You mean as in you can swap it between, as in I can buy an M4A1 this round and next round I can buy the A1, right? Is that what you meant?
Yeah, it was Brolin, I'm pretty sure, that tweeted out something along the lines of, hey, speaking about grenade dropping, why don't we allow people to buy the A4 or the A1S at will? Just changing things like that. It's not that anything has changed yet, But I think it's important that we start these kinds of conversations so we can weigh the pros and cons publicly. And then, I mean, Valve can read in how they want to on these situations and then just make the decision that they think is fit. And I do think that with the Valve method of updates, they are probably going to just keep whatever they do for an extended period of time. I mean, we saw the Krieg for 8+ months. And I mean, even though people are complaining constantly about it, it will change the game. And I think that, those conversations are just very important. And it's really nice that they're starting up again during the player break, that, people are taking their foot off the gas in terms of playing the game so they can look at a greater picture in terms of seeing what are some fundamental mechanics that maybe we could tinker with a bit.
Okay. You have any thoughts on that, Paladin?
I think the whole conversation about different like gameplay shifts brings me back to when Moses tweeted out changing bomb sites, specific bomb site on maps. Yeah. I think that also is a great idea. Like stuff like that is just keeps people so engaged in the game. And I know a lot of people like are like casual players are facing a little bit more burnout of playing Mirage Inferno again. But how about like we change I think he specifically gave an example of like changing the A bomb site, moving the boxes around a little bit every season. And that way, it really brings out this specialty of teams who can figure it out on the fly, right? Like if Astralis were in the Berlin Major and something had changed and they won on Vertigo, like actually they actually changed the map before they played Vertigo, right? I think.
Yeah, before that major, yes.
Yeah, and that was just equally like brilliant, if not more brilliant, that they managed to beat Liquid on that map because of how different the map had shifted. So I think something like that even. People talking about this could shift in that direction as well. I think changing during seasons will be super important in the future if we want to keep things fresh.
It's actually funny that's like become, funnily enough, one of the famous ideas that's actually come from Moses, because normally when people have like a certain like thing they go on and on about, it's like usually they've just tunneled too deep on it and everyone else say, who cares? It's just like, that's actually, no joke, one of the best ideas I think anyone's ever had in CSGO, because his premise was exactly what he's saying, Mauisnake. It wasn't that you take the map and every time you drastically rework it. His idea basically was you take especially like a core map like it does to a Mirage, it's probably always going to be here. It's more just the idea that like each year maybe you tweak one area, so it doesn't even have to be drastic. It could be literally like one key area in mid or one part of a bomb site setup, like for example maybe on Dust 2 maybe the plateau just doesn't have the main box on, like what would that do to the, who the fuck know. The point is these in theory could be small changes. What I like about them essentially is unless you do a really drastic one, odds are you don't fuck the whole map up. Like the rest of the map plays fine still, so it's still a legit map that we know is good on some level. But as you're saying, it adds a competitive change where you can't just only run the shit that worked for 5 years. You got to look for your new edges. So I actually think personally, I'm amazed if Valve, they claim, we're listening to everything, we just don't do everything. Well, you just don't know fucking money then, mate, because that's an amazing idea. Like, Lord, it's almost an idea that has almost no downside at this point. Bearing in mind at the moment, the current alternative is we just take the map out entirely, usually fuck it up 6 ways to Sunday, and sometimes it might never even come back. So bear in mind the alternative. I even like that idea. I think it's pretty legit. In terms of the more mechanical aspect, though, the only problem I have with that topic is, like, I've always said this. The reason why actually way back in the day I did like a pretty in-depth interview with that Sloth Squadron guy is one thing I learned is you can analyze the game by like eye test, intuitive feel, etc. But how the game's actually coded is it's its own world, and you have to literally understand coding to really know what you're talking about. So I'll give you a very quick example. One thing as just an observer that I hated about CSGO is in 1.6, essentially if you're the best player, almost every gun has a mode or a technique of firing which is almost entirely accurate. So for example, everyone's favorite pistol in 1.6 is the USP, because if you slowly tap the USP and let the crosshair go down, it's 100% accurate. So if you're Forest, you can really just one-shot everyone in the head with the USP. Now in CSGO, as everyone might know, if you even do that, it doesn't even work as a technique. It fires way too slow, and because the other people move while they do it, theirs isn't like way more accurate, but they just get so many more shots off and are moving, that it's just by far the better way to do it. Now, when I said to someone essentially, I wish they just made the pistols so they worked like 1.6, he was like, yeah, but the problem with that is you're not just adjusting the gun, you're adjusting the way the actual like firing of the weapons worked. And that would also then apply to like an AK, for example. Like basically there's like knock-on and secondary effects you can never know if you're not a programmer. Like essentially I'm just saying like, just put the one mole down here. And he said, that makes 3 moles come up over here. I'm like, I didn't fucking design whack-a-mole, so I don't know how this works. So basically I'll just say whenever it's like literal like engine-based stuff, like we can have cool ideas, but they're always going to be fairly abstract. Like how they're actually implemented is really hard to understand. Like that's a really tough area, I've got to say. You've got to be an expert about the engine as well, I'm afraid, you know. Right, we'll move on then. Does anyone have a final point for that? Should we just go to man?
I mean, just to wrap it up, I think it's just good. It needs to happen that people need to think about the game more on a meta scale than just talking about the esports side of it, the teams, the ecosystem. I think talking about the game too is a valuable discussion that can lead to better change instead of seeing like it just felt like Valve did things because they were bored. But if we talk about changes we actually want to see instead of just complaining about things we don't like, that's that can bring more positivity to the space than just kind of the rehashing of, oh man, Aztec is meh, you know, the A-bomb site is meh. Like, just positive discussion, like actual answers those are appreciated.
There's even, by the way, psychologically a reason why that's even a good suggestion, which is if someone asks for something and you actually look at it and go, not a bad idea, and then you make it, right? In theory, you assume they're going to be grateful because you gave them what they asked for. Meanwhile, if someone just goes, this is shit, I don't like this, part of you even thinks like, fuck you, I'll see if there's some way I can't change it. You know what I mean? Like you almost have like an antagonistic. I agree with you. I think that's an even better way to frame it, right? So for mine, for good, I will say it's obviously a biased comment I'm about to make. It's because I thought with the people we've got on this particular show, it's a perfect topic. It alludes to what I said before. My good thing at the moment, because let's be real, there's no CS going on, so there wasn't like a lot I could pick from. I actually decided what I would pick is, I think what will be a pretty counter take to most people's perspective. I actually think the content / like analysis space for third-party creators is better than it's ever been in CSGO. Like, I thought personally that we actually had, when Mauisnake, and if people don't know, another person I brought through, which was that Max Malik guy, and we had the fucking Sam Delorme guy from Canada, like we had like almost like a second golden generation of like talent. If you notice, most of those names don't even exist in the scene anymore. Like they came for a while, they liked it or they didn't like it, and then for whatever reasons otherwise in their lives they exited and they don't even do anything in CS anymore. So I think if you look at the scene right now, obviously Paladin's someone brand new we brought on, but everyone knows all the people who became the coach. It's fucking Elmer Puddy, Nat out here, there's another one I'm forgetting, Mauisnake obviously does stuff, Vu, there's loads of people right now. Like I feel like Launders obviously is one of the main commentators in the world and does loads of demos reviews. So listen, you can argue which preference you like as to what your shit is, you know, but I don't think we've ever had more people independently making content. Like it's actually, there's so much content out there for people to watch.
I have to agree. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think even as far as the players are concerned, I think they've stepped it up a lot dramatically as well. I think Kerrigan's voice comms, people have been talking about wanting voice comms at halftime and full time in casual games. This is like the best kind of version of that. You know, you get to listen in on what they're playing and how they're playing, how the environment is, how the energy is. That's a great idea. And then Alij has been doing some phenomenal content over there at Liquid. I've loved how he's trying to help the semi-pros and the amateurs get to a level where they can actually compete in something like a Rank S or FPL competitively. So I think they've stepped up as well.
Yeah, I love that people are specializing on top of that. There's a surprising amount of people I'm seeing doing content for what I would consider the tier 2 / tier 3 space. I think, so Exner, for example, is a guy that does stuff and he covers pretty much ESEA Premier in North America. There's, I think, what's his username? M&M's is doing also more stuff with North America Premier. There's so
Who's also like a journalist for Dust2 US, right? That's the guy we're talking about.
That guy. Okay. King T is making stuff about kind of EU like tier 2, tier 3 players, and he's pretty entertaining. Yeah, there's just so many people that are making a lot of great stuff right now. And you know, I think the main thing that is holding a lot of people back is the fact that you're not really getting a large return on your investment in terms of like you're not getting the
not today at
return.
least. Yeah, exactly. You're not going to directly make back the money today from what you do today. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So that can definitely pull people away from the space, and I would assume Sam and Max Mellon. I think Max is doing some kind of more regular music journalism type stuff now, if not just worldly journalism. And I'm not sure what Sam is up to, but either way, it kind of felt like they moved away because there weren't enough financial incentives to continue doing it. So it would be nice if everybody got tens of thousands of viewers and we all got crazy ad revenue, but there is an element to having to bite the bullet and just get your just dig deep and just keep going for it over and over again, because if your stuff rises to the top, you will get noticed, and you will. There's opportunities for any kind of work, whether it's coaching or talent work or anything like that. I mean, that is
caster even maybe.
Yeah, casting. Yeah, I mean, I modeled my whole kind of game off of I like what Launders was doing years before I did it. He was kind of the guy I was looking up to in terms of, and I even went to his Twitch channel and asked, like, would you have any tips for getting more into it and getting noticed? And he gave a little bit of a response there, and just things like that just kind of helped me keep doing it. And now I'm getting a sizable amount of gigs per year. Obviously, big thanks to you, Thorin, too, for getting me in on the Epicenter gig, which really kick-started everything. But I was grinding at the same time, just making YouTube videos and casting tier 2, tier 3 stuff. But that I think that there's a light at the end of the tunnel that a lot of content creators see, and that they can really strive for nowadays.
Yeah, by the way, the point you made there is a key one as well, because that's actually the real reason, no joke, what you said about how, like, you won't basically make back the ad rev to make it, like, day-to-day seem worthwhile in terms of literally, like, return on investment of your time. But that's actually the mistake I think a lot of people make, because, dude, if you knew how many really established people, by the way, spoiler, all the commentators that have worked with me on the Tier 1 desks for the last 5 years, they all say the same thing privately. They all go, oh, I should really have started my YouTube, or I should put more time into my YouTube. And it's like, you don't for that reason, which is that it doesn't make you the money tomorrow that whatever other gig you do does. But what you're missing is all the like other effects it can have. Like, for example, you could, if you were like Pimp, for example, you could already have a video that broke down like a certain team, and instead of just referencing it 50 times, you could say, watch it on my YouTube channel, and like it would provide extra depth for people who think you can only talk for 2 minutes or something. There's a million angles to it. And the other angle as well is, like, as you say, basically it's like the social proof, which is just the effect of how it will spread your name in the industry and show that you're competent. That might not pay you today, but it might lead to the job that does tomorrow. That's the key part to me. Because, by the way, when you say that part about Epicenter, what people don't get is this, because the better example would obviously be when I brought Alan to Flashpoint 2, because he'd literally never worked any event whatsoever, and he hadn't, like, at least you've done like some online games or something, like, he had no experience whatsoever. But the problem is, he didn't entirely, like, he didn't do an events, but first of all, not only was I going to literally be there on site so I could give him pointers, but dude, I'd probably watched like 50 hours of him on YouTube videos of his own initiative, so I actually did know like his skill set, what his chops are. Like, I'm not just gambling. I haven't really just picked a guy out of a crowd. It's more like I observed for real, like what they all did in private almost, and I could kind of know who would make it if they were given the chance, as it were. So yeah, like, even just for its, by the way, this is all like career-based, like one career, but put it this way, just for its own value, as I say, I just appreciate that we have loads of people actually breaking the game down, though, because that's the area in CSGO we were always the weakest. Like, I always used to think what's whack is, it's almost like we pay the fucking talent too much, because people like Yanko, fucking Moses, Sponge, they would all get up there and they do their 35 seconds on the analyst desk segment, but that's not enough time for them to go into depth, and then because we pay them all a fucking king's ransom, they just fuck off and have a beer. Like, we never actually get to know, except for those like 3 1-hour YouTube videos Yanko did, what would his in-depth thoughts be about every aspect of the game. So I like the idea that we're actually getting the chance now to go super deep, because I don't know if I think you did a bit of Dota, right, Mauisnake?
I mean, Dota was kind of my main game before 2015.
Basically, you'll know this then. In Dota, it's the opposite to CS. Everything's fucking about analysis. It's all like they're being nerdy as you can in the draft and what they're doing with this chat. Yeah. So I always thought in CS, considering we are such a tactical game, we're actually pretty light on that. Like, even the broadcasts don't go heavy. So I'm glad there's content where people actually try to break down a whole demo or take a player and show all his different tendencies. I think we need that shit. It's even what people in theory they claim they want. A lot of them don't. But if you do it the right way, and some people want it, put it out with. Some people want it.
Yeah, I think you gain, well, you gain a lot of, I would say, in addition, what I call it, social currency, where when you make all these videos, it does just give you, like you kind of were saying, a little bit more proof that you just know what you're talking about. And that's something that's so valuable if you're a public figure that, I mean, that's maybe something that's more of a discussion between people that are more in the industry already, but that really does help elevate your brand. The fact that, you know, if anybody wants to hear what I have to say about Simple, I've made it like an hour-long video on him. You know, like, so it just makes it so that there's never that really doubt, I don't think, like in a coworker's mind, that I just don't know what I'm talking about, because if they really want to hear it, they can listen to everything I have to say about hundreds of players, you know?
Yes.
So.
If you get good enough, eventually you don't even have to put any effort into the demo review at all, like Launders does. You know, it's just. Oh, sorry, it's still on. My bad. That was the private green room take. My bad. I love you, Launders. Just I'm saying some of them are like. In fact, I've even told him this straight up. The problem is this, Launders. There's sometimes games, like some of the simple ones I've watched, where you're watching him do the most insane shit, and you're just like, wow. It's crazy, dude. I'm like, what? This is inappropriate. Like, come on, where's the appreciation? The guy's just like done like a fucking 360 no scope for real. Right, okay, we'll go now to the bad section. So, Paladin, what is your bad? What did you pick here? By the way, I will say, Mauisnake, you're going to find that this sounds like he's doing your point, but I found a clever way to divide it based on how you both wrote it. So what was your bad point, Paladin?
I have to say, Gade moving to big, it's shocking to me. You have the opportunity to bring in somebody like Favin from Sprout to just instantly boost the firepower on the squad, which is what I think personally the team is sorely lacking. I think players like Keto have been kind of disappointing in my eyes, and Favin would have been just such a brilliant pickup. I think roles, it wasn't too far off, but the other aspect also of bringing in Gade is they want to help Tabson with the calling. But I don't think his calling is necessarily that brilliant either. I mean, I was watching some demos from Hyenas, and a lot of his strats on the T side of any map really was just very shallow FPL type gameplay, and I'm just not impressed by his calling or his fragging, to be completely honest. And I think that for that reason, I think that it's my bad. I just don't think it's gonna work. I think it's gonna make them a much worse team.
You can see there, Mauisnake, my hint of what I'm saying. You can see how we're going to separate this one. So just only do it explicitly on what his point was, and then we can still do yours as the bad, because it'll be the second part of yours, obviously.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, Gade is he's been pretty disappointing. I mean, he's been pretty average for the past couple years in my eyes. He was brought in, and I kind of to North, and I thought that this was going to be some sick fragger. I mean, his jawline is awesome, so I thought surely this guy is going to just be a monster in the server. But no, that's just not how the game works. And he's been like you said, hyenas were. Oof, man, watching them play was never really fun, honestly. It was always just kind of saying, can I see a pop-off from Kirby before he retired? Can I see Fessor do anything, you know, like, because this guy's a new talent, right? And it was kind of like forerunning a lot, I guess. It was just very, yeah, like you said, it was sort of puggy. Like sometimes they just default and two people are acting aggressively at the same time. It's like, that's just not how you're supposed to play, you know, standard situations like this. Like, it's all a little too desperate all over the map for them sometimes. So I think that Gade is, he's just not really the type of player, and I'm so glad you brought up Favin, because he's been the guy for a year or two now that I've been just like, when is this going to happen? It's going to happen, but when? And it didn't even happen now. So that's just mad disappointing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm definitely with you on this overall, both people, because I personally always thought the thing with Gade was it's just a much of nothing. You know, it's not he's terrible. He's not great. He's just an okay player. Like, if I had to pick like the dictionary definition of just an okay fucking tier 1/tier 2 player, he'd be one of them. But the problem, I think, is this. So to me, the reason this is a bad move is because it's what you could have done instead, essentially. Like, think of all the different moves you could have gone with. Like, for me, the obvious thing you did need also was firepower. But the problem is, if you look at this particular signing and the things they've said, like, I actually already had a sense for why they were doing this move, which is, since Big is a team that thinks of themselves in a very stereotypical German, like, the team is a machine and it will operate this way, and we are trying to like do things in a very specific sense, you know, and this X follows Y follow, you know, like one of those things. Unfortunately, I think they're using the logic of like, I'm going to guess in his teams, if you look how many teams Gade's been in, right? I've never heard anyone actually who was a teammate of his say anything bad about him. So that usually implies kind of like Azy. No matter what a fan thinks, inside the team, the perception usually is you do your job and you probably even do whatever you're told to do. That's usually how those players get by. So listen, I could understand why a team that thinks it's going to be a tactical unit, and maybe in case of Xantares, maybe they think he couldn't do this because I'm guessing he didn't have amazing German. Like, I'm guessing they probably think in terms of how he fits the team, it could be an upgrade. But like, not only is it not an upgrade over Xantares, but like, as we're saying, there are many players I feel like could have done this at a better level in your team, even if you wanted to like go international as they're doing potentially, like with some of these moves, because they say he speaks German. We'll see about that. I'll see if I believe that after 3 months, right? I just feel as though, yeah, it's just a missed opportunity, because if you look at Big as a squad, like, they're not going back up at this point in time. In a world where LANs come back as well, they feel like there's going to be also ran. So, to me, unfortunately, when I saw this move, in terms of Gade joining, it kind of killed my hype for Big a bit. It kind of makes me think I don't really give a fuck about him, to be honest.
I think another thing is that they could have really pivoted back to full German, like sure. all native speakers. And I think that there is something completely different about the state of the game if you have somebody that's learning German and coming in, as opposed to somebody that's already learned and like lived the language. Like it just makes things a lot more easier. And I think that culture-wise and just like all the intangibles point to somebody more. They have so much domestic talent just from Sprout alone that I think it just kind of was a no-brainer in my eyes. So I agree.
Right, let's do it then, Mauisnake. So we already teased it, but what was your bad point? Because obviously it's going to be connected somehow.
Right, yeah. So my bad point is pretty much the flip side of it, which is just not only is Big getting Gade, but they're losing Xantares. That's bad. I think there's so many elements that I can touch on with Xantares leaving. The first is that, what is he doing becoming an IGL? Why on earth are we making another star rifler just pick up the IGL role? Come on, man. You got to just think about your own. What are your strengths, Xantares? He locks down positions with rifle work. He can play. He can play in a multitude of situations, and even when he's caught off guard, he just wins duels. You know, he's gotten a little bit better at clutching, but even when you watch him in those kind of 2v2s, 2v3s, he wins those because he's just raw mechanically speaking, that so much so that he doesn't have to play them in the best, ABC 1, 2, 3 kind of way. He can just straight up impose himself. And so that's a problem where I just think that the new roster is going to really hinder his performance as an individual. And the second thing is just that Big, like we were saying, they just lost so much firepower with losing Xantares. Xantares has been their star for the past 5 months in my eyes. I think Surson easily had it in 2020, but in 2021, where Big's been kind of just meandering at this 8th to 10th place in the HLTV rankings, it's been Xantares who has been kind of clearly the best player for me, and it's because of all these things I just mentioned, that he can play in so many different ways, and he always just seems like he's a shark that is just locked in, and he smells blood all the time, and he's just super hyper focused. Where even if a situation should catch him off guard, he's so ready and he's so quick that it doesn't matter, because he's just so much better mechanically.
What do you think, Paladin?
I think that, jumping off of that point, I think that if you're going to be playing as an IGL, you have so many different things that you have to now worry about that are just like suddenly on your radar, that things like that, those small little bits and pieces of his game that where he's very sharp in how he plays, is going to just eventually get honed down. Like it's just going to eventually evaporate, and they're going to and he's just going to have to focus on the team. He has to like take a step back, and I think there are very few players that can frag like that. I mean, obviously Tabson is somebody that can do that, but I just don't think he's the caliber of player that can do both. Like, he's going to have to pick one or the other, and if that team has to be successful, it has to be the IGL first, the fragging second. Like, there's just no choice.
Sure. Yeah, first of all, like, again, I don't speak Turkish, so I wouldn't claim another guy personally, but just based on the eye test and the things I've seen within the community, of all the people who would become an IGL, this seems like one of the worst candidates I can actually even think of. I mean, I even think to myself, like, as you're saying there about like all the things you have to do differently. To me, when a player like this becomes an IGL, you've got two choices. Either somehow he actually cracks it and you've just got an IGL and you don't have the star player anymore. That ain't great. Or you've only got a worse version of the star player who's going to be a bad IGL now, which is, I think, the worst possible scenario of everything. Because in that case, you fuck up two roles at once. Two at once. Now you fucked up the IGL and the star player. So, like, in that scenario, like, that's a nightmare. And also, let's add in, those experiments always last way too long because you were the star player. So you have incredible social currency within the team. Like, you have status which allows you to do it way more than, like, if the bad player did that in the team, he'd just be kicked tomorrow, wouldn't he? Like, he's bad and we kicked him. Like, we'll give this guy extra time. So I think it's terrible, this move in general. Like, for Big, it kills me because he was, like, the main firepower, like you say, Mauisnake. Realistically, the two players he needed all the time was Sirison and Xantares. Tabson was like a freebie if he could be an IGL land frag. So you needed him. And let's be real, this is what's sad to me. Big is not a team, if people don't know, who have a lot of money. They're not a team that's in a mega place in the industry. Like, they're only known basically for Counter-Strike and a little bit of League of Legends, and that's at like tier 2 and tier 3, by the way. So basically, Counter-Strike is their shit. And even then, they don't pay high salaries compared to, quite frankly, anyone in their peer group. Like, they were paying very low salaries for the top 10 ranking, by the way. The idea they had the number one team in the world was basically a bargain team. And then the other thing is, if you're in that position, it means whoever is going to be a Xantares type player for you, it's going to have to be a player like Xantares. It's going to have to be someone who has a gamble reason that they would join your team. So everyone knows years ago it was Smooya. In this case, it's Xantares. Who could it be in the future? It'd have to be someone like Oscar. It'd have to be someone like fucking Guardian or something. Like, the problem they have is there aren't really many players they could ever get that are as good as Xantares, no matter what flaws you might think Xantares has. So I kind of do feel like, sadly, maybe they do even improve tactically, but they just become, like, you know, the fucking 15th best team in the world, and they're just cool for tactics, you know, but it won't make them like, put it this way, if anyone's hyped that they're actually going to be like amazing, I can't see it personally. And then on the Xantares side, like, listen, I know that on paper this sounds fun, and I compared it to the Tyloo team, because I always used to say they're fun to watch, but they are a nightmare the way they're playing Counter-Strike. Like, I can't see who actually thinks this, like, fucking sort of Space Soldiers Redux team, I can't see who thinks this is actually going to be a top team in the world. That feels like a fucking reach and a half, you know. Come on.
I can't see them progressing past, you know, a fluky run at one tournament, especially when they're newer and people don't know their style yet. They could come top 4 in some kind of, you know, if DreamHack Masters still existed, it just feels like they would come top 4 at one. And that's probably the best run that they have, and they'd probably keep the lineup together longer by 6 months than it should, just because of that kind of, you know, just single fluke and everyone popping off in a way. But once people really read their style, I think it's going to end up being a little bit more one-dimensional. I would be shocked if Xantares as an IGL in 4 months could play a style that runs the clock down to 25 seconds. I'd be amazed, honestly. So, you know, good luck. Good luck, because he's so exciting when he's on, but as an IGL, this just it just makes no sense.
Oh, and by the way, just because people do this, you know where people come up with different corp reasons as to why it could work, and they just reach like a motherfucker, like prime Street Fighter 2 Dalsim reaches just across the entire screen. Right, here's a reach and a half. So people might say naively, Mauisnake, but he was just in Big, and you said they're a really good tactical team. Right, I'll take the same logic. If I told you tomorrow Device is going to be the IGL and NIP, are you all in on that? Do you love that idea? Then shut the fuck up, because that would even make more sense than fucking Xantares being. So if you're not going to grant that to someone like a Device, because you know obviously it wouldn't be as good as having Clave, then don't do that stupid logic in this case. It doesn't make any sense at all. I think what you will find out is the second Xantares leaves Big Jersey, magically doesn't seem that good at tactics anymore like he was in their team. I think you'll even probably find out one day in an interview, if they can admit it, he probably had trouble with that in the team, as I think they alluded to in the first version when they had God B. Like, I don't think he ever super duper fit their squad. He was, like I said, he was sort of overqualified skill-wise, so they had to gamble, and I don't blame him at all, but it was the right gamble to take, just as the Smoothie 1 years before was. Right, so here's what I've picked as my bad. Now, what's good is, obviously there's not much going on right now, there's no tournament, so you have to be creative, but you know what, if you needed someone to be creative and come up with a really weird angle on something that's bad that no one else has come up with on a show, it's fucking get a deck chout and sit back. Let me work, motherfucker. I built a career on this. So this is the maddest angle of all time, right? This is actually something that low-key is pissing me off, but I'm the only person in the world who actually is pissed off by this, which is, now that we've got LANs back, right? Yes, only like in the most technically true sense I am Cologne. It didn't have the stadium and stuff, which is what we all really tend to mean by LANs and the atmosphere and all that. But we're getting back to that closely. And obviously the whole premise of this drama about the major is that it has to have a crowd. It has to have something like what we used to when you mean LAN. Even if that was, you know, like a fifth of the people, it'd still be better than what we had currently, right? So I'm looking to a world where we get back to the real LAN circuit, right? And it's LAN after LAN after LAN. Well, here's the one downside, right? Because the online era lasted way too long, by the end, every single team pretty much with the exception of basically Astralis and, let me think. I mean, technically FaZe doesn't have this issue because they still all off, but like pretty much every team basically made changes to players that aren't experienced tier 1 LAN players as the fixes to their teams. That's how almost everyone fixed the squad. The downside of that, I hope people can see where I'm going here, is it actually means, in my opinion, when we get back to the first LANs, I don't think many teams are actually going to be that good. Like, I know some teams manage some nice runs at Cologne, but like a lot of these players, and they're in basically all the top 10, top 15 teams, every team has one or two players who sort of are still going to be like a question mark, might need time to develop, might never make it in that team, you never know. So to me, essentially, I wrote it down as the depletion of the LAN generation. Like the generation where everyone who was in tier 1 was LAN proven, that's basically gone. I know it doesn't seem like it's long, it was only just over a year, but that is all it took to effectively kind of remove that aspect. So it means that for me, the first like 6 or 7 months of LAN, it's almost like uncharted territory. It's almost like the beginning of the game or something, you know. It feels like a new world to me.
I think that's probably why G2 has a leg up. I think that all of their players are at least proven. But yeah, I can't say that anybody else is truly proven in front of a crowd. I don't think there's any other team that, but maybe Astralis. Maybe, you know, but you mentioned that. You mentioned FaZe, you mentioned Astralis, and I think those are kind of the other two that I see, and I think that, you know, everybody there should be pretty comfortable playing in front of a live audience.
Flip side, I think teams like Spirit or Heroic, you know, sometimes I feel like most of their core are all very young. They're unproven, but they've broken out on the online stages. They won pro, like obviously Heroic won Pro League, Spirit went deep in Katowice, but I don't think anything like that is going to happen when the LANs come back, because, you know, there's a completely different situation as to how you play the game when you can't hear anything. You know, like I know a lot of people have made points about how when Gambit came to Cologne, like you don't have Groove behind you talking to you constantly. You also don't have the comms aren't up. Like yes. You can't hear every little footstep. And that hurts a lot of these online teams. So stuff like that, all those small things really add up and can really psych up these younger teams. And I completely agree. Teams like FaZe, Astralis, you can see clearly they had deep semifinal runs out of nowhere seemingly, and they weren't really on the cards of going deep. But I think this is something that's going to repeat for a little while until everybody gets a little bit more used to how the crowds shift the game like dramatically.
Like, one thing I always appreciated, basically, like I'll use the NBA analogy, Mauisnake, because I know back in the day you used to watch it a bit. One thing I always appreciated is that we actually had in Counter-Strike kind of like a sports vibe where it makes sense almost where people place in the tournament. Like, yeah, you're a guy who's only ever made the first round of the playoffs. Like, oh, you're the guy who's like won the chat. Like, there was almost a logic if you looked at like usually where people were on LAN. Like, it was a good barometer of how good people actually are. Whereas I feel like if anything, by the way, if you're a fan of these new players, like the fact there's so many of them, a couple of them are probably going to have a mad initial start to the LAN career where they might play way better than they should, but it'll make it a bit weird because, you know, like speaking of, like I'll give you the best example when we were speaking earlier of MSL. There's someone where his teams, it's very rare they're going to place like 4 playoff rounds further than you'd expect. Like they're probably going to be a quarterfinal team, or, you know, maybe make it out of group. You know, it's kind of like there's a logic to where they are. You know, I feel like that's gone at the moment.
I agree with that. Yeah, that's similar to the NBA bubble, where it just seemed like this Miami Heat team kind of came out of nowhere. You know, they had one player that was decent, but then it's kind of like, really? That's where they're placing now.
And then just disappeared right afterwards, you know, as you say.
Yeah, exactly. Once there's crowds again, like, what are you guys doing? That I really hope that doesn't happen to Gambit, because they did play such great CS during the online era. It would be really a shame to see all of that just be written off immediately once they start placing, you know, bottom, like topping out at top 8, you know, at tournaments. But it already seems like they've kind of proven that at Cologne, that they should be solid, given the fact that they made it out of groups. But yeah, it was always kind of comforting to know that there was some level of consistency with LAN proven players that, like you said, it's just you look at their names and the name value actually holds weight. Whereas during the online era, you could just pick up any FPL kid and he might actually be the reason you guys make it to the playoffs in the next tournament. I'm kind of looking at Yakinder with that one, but I mean, he did it for so many months straight that
he's the best version of that. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So I think But we'll see. We'll see if those individuals continue to perform, and I hope they do, because it can usher in a new era of just people that we get familiar with, and we already know that some of them have fun enough personalities that, and they're charismatic enough that, like Kinder, who's like, he's kind of become a fan favorite, and he's also been someone that people love to hate at the same time.
Right, Paladin, for the ugly, what did you pick, mate?
So it's a little bit more abstract, but I think it's a little bit of a pipe dream. But I think it's absolutely ridiculous that EPL Season 14 is being considered as an IEM Grand Slam event, because we've been riding the highs of IEM Cologne, LAN, great, whatever. But how terrible would it be if Na'Vi somehow win this event, and it's kind of like a whimper instead of a bang, and they win like such a coveted prize? Or on the flip side, what if Gambit win this title and get the second to last title that they need to win? Are you telling me that they're going to win only online titles, and let's say they fluke a LAN in the coming future? Are you telling me that a team that's won one LAN, like I know they played really well in the online era, but only one LAN tournament deserves that like coveted spot to be up next to like Astralis or Liquid or something like that? Like, do you really think that that's like viable? I just think that's bullshit. I think that just for this situation, since Malta didn't work out, I feel like it should be the right decision to just like maybe like void it out of the Grand Slam and just try to shift in another one. I don't know.
What do you think, Mauisnake?
It deserves a huge asterisk if they do. That is, yeah, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. The fact that teams can kind of claim the same level of achievement as Prime Astralis, Prime Liquid, when it is a majority of online events that they're winning. I think that's a great point. We've kind of touched on that before, I think, Thorin, in
Yes.
another show, that it just, you can't really fault the teams for obviously doing it. You can only play the tournament that you're in. You have to just play those kinds of rules, and I think it's more up to who would make the decision then to revoke it, and that would be Intel, right? Or maybe they're partners with ESL, I suppose. So I don't really think that Intel would want to just pull the money away. And the thing is that Intel as a company just makes so much money that it really, this $1 million, it to them means so much less than it does to us as people that are actually invested in this scene, that we know the value of a Grand Slam in terms of stature. But them, they're probably like, oh, we get to give out the money and we get to put our name on another broadcast for longer. So I think in a way they're just just okay with it. I wish there was a little bit more connect between the magnitude, the gravitas of the events that are being won, but it just doesn't. Yeah, that's a very good ugly point, I would say.
Yeah, basically, I hate it because, like, I pointed this out already. I hated the idea when it was just Gambit that looked like they were going to do. They were just going to win an online Intel Grand Slam, because even though when you say Astralis and Team Liquid, people are going to, but Liquid didn't win a major. Yeah, that's actually one of the reasons why this Grand Slam was important, in my opinion. Because here's the thing: if they can go through history and there's only like 4 teams ever win a Grand Slam, and they're the only one that didn't win a major, it probably hints that they were also fucking amazing, even though they didn't win a major. So it's another way to show how good the team was. And obviously, if it's for LAN, that's an incredibly hard. Like, put it this way, people don't like to hear this, but you have to be very precise with your language. I'm not saying it's a better accomplishment prestige-wise, because everyone wants to win the major, but I think it's almost objectively harder to win the Grand Slam than to win a major, because you can fluke a major. I'm sorry, you can't fluke 4 LAN wins out of whatever it is, 8 or 10 events. Or like, that is incredibly hard. You basically have to be probably the best team of that particular era of Counter-Strike, unless you just happen to only win those events, ESL events and nothing else. Like, the odds of it. So basically, my problem is, if it's online, it's not going to be the same as what those teams did with those LAN runs, because obviously Astralis was in the period of the best era ever, and then Liquid was just absurdly dominant for those few months. Just they didn't have to be a major when they could have won it. So, like, to me, I want the Grand Slam to be something like majors, which are like the biggest accomplishments you can have on your resume. Like, hopefully one day they like I say, the best thing about the Grand Slam one is it's actually even more of a prestige lock than the major, because in theory you can't fluke it. Like, so I hoped that at the end of CSGO, if they kept doing this every year, you'd have like 3 or 4 teams did it, but they would all be like the truly greatest teams ever. And then we could have even had an awesome conversation at the end of CSGO, or major winners versus Grand Slam. We could have done shadow boxed it. So my problem is this. It's not that you can't run the Grand Slam. It's just, I think if ESL themselves, because they'd have to be the one, as you say, like I doubt Intel understands the nuances of what we're talking about here. ESL would have to be the one that did it. But what I would have said is this. I would have said, because we're trying to protect the prestige of what it means to win at the LAN circuit, we're going to take the same money, but in 2020 or 2021, it's, the King of the Online Era award or something, have some different branding for it. Because basically, I don't want it to be in 4 years where there is essentially at least a fan asterisk, like, yeah, but that wasn't a real Grand Slam, whatever that angle is,
I think that, go for it.
I think it takes away from what Gambit has done as well. Like, I think that how terrible would it be for the community to be like, okay, in like, I don't know, 5-6 years from now, we go down the list and we see Gambit and we're like, well, yeah, but it was online. They fell off. They only made semifinals and quarterfinals after that. So I don't think that it really could be vouched for. I think that takes away from their prestige. But how cool would it be if, they did it on LAN? Like that would be just way better, I think.
I just don't want for the future of the Grand Slam because we just don't know the future of COVID and what's going to happen with tournaments or how many. Ideally, we would have all LANs in 7 months from now or something like that. But we just don't know at this point, and who knows like the future of pandemics and how things are handled in certain countries. So, what I'm trying to get at here is that if Grand Slams become this kind of alternating online tournaments matter, LAN tournaments matter,
right,
then it just cheapens the Astralis and Liquid ones so much. It just makes those feel like you just start thinking of the Grand Slam, the way you would associate it is just like, oh yeah, a team that, oh yeah, wait, what? Gambit, they won 3 online ones, 1 LAN one. Yeah, that was nice. Yeah, that was $1 million that they won. And it's just going to be this thing that you just kind of tack it on. You just tack it on to a little bit of a streak that someone had. You might just think it's a cool $1 million hot streak, right? But it really has so much more value than that in its current state, at least with the 2 previous winners of it.
Yes.
But if it moves forward and it's just some like 2 LAN wins, 2 online wins, it's just like, really? That just feels like that's the Grand Slam nowadays. Just call it something else at this point.
Right, what was yours on the ugly one here, Maui? What did you pick? Basically, I just made it the first sentence of yours. You don't have to read the whole thing. Just read the first sentence.
Well, okay, yeah. So I think that Luis from HLTV just departed, and they talked about how they're going in a different direction. It looks like Professor, Striker, they're going to have bigger roles with HLTV, which I don't have anything against any of them. In fact, I run a podcast with Note, so in fact, I hope to see him succeed even more. It's just more that I see that the direction that the articles are taking immediately after Luis's departure is kind of more like it's looser. So the article I would be referring to would be this ancient one where I think, I'm sorry if it's Striker or Professor, it's one of the 2 of the guys, and honestly. One of them made an article about what 5 pros think about Ancient, and I think that's fine. I think that's a valuable article, but it kind of just doesn't strike me as something that should be on the front page of HLTV. And this made me think the ugly. It's not like this is the worst thing. I think in this list of good, bad, and ugly, it's just kind of ugly that the front page now is what I think is going to be flooded with more kind of looser variety articles. And I think that what HLTV needs to do is they need to have different sections now for articles. I think they can't just have this one single column of articles, because that is including roster shifts, it's including tournament results, it's including tournament previews, it's including these kind of opinion pieces, it's including so much stuff now that I think that needs to change. I think that's basically my ugly, is that the HLTV front page is going to get clogged with articles that have varying levels of significance.
Do you have any thoughts on this, Paladin?
Yeah, I think I'd like to think that this is something that's only going to be happening because of the tournament break. But I definitely agree. Like, having separate tabs would make things a lot easier, because HLTV, its prestige comes from the fact that they break news, and they are always on the ball as to how like reports come in and stuff like that. And if you want to like kind of water down that like high intensity website to something like that, it could overall like just it doesn't work in their favor. Like they will just lose their integrity as a website. You know, that they like. I think their branding is like the home of competitive Counter-Strike or something like that. And like I don't know. It seems like a great video piece of content. Like, I mean, I know Rivalry did content like that a lot. I think they still do stuff like that. But if you're gonna keep pushing that type of content, I think that it might just ruin the integrity of the site. I mean, I'd rather HLTV be known as the site that reports and has strong MVP candidates, and you know, there's a lot of stuff that people go to that site for that I feel like would ruin the reason why people would visit them later on, I guess.
To me, I think they just miss the point of the site, which is, as you say, people go there and the idea is it's like the front page of Counter-Strike. Like, what's the news? Who's joining this team? Oh, what tournament's coming up? Like, it's only after that you go, oh, is there a piece of content you might watch? Like, I feel like that's a way lower amount of people in the overlap. So to me, I would have even done it something like, I wouldn't say like don't do it. I would say have like a separate section like you maybe alluded to there, Mauisnake. Like maybe there's 2 columns. One's just the news, which everyone's going to tune into. One's content, like sort of shoulder content, as it were. Because I did always think, by the way, that's the area I've had a massive knock on HLTV the entire time it's existed. You had all these people who got status as community experts and they watched the game. Where the fuck's all the content then? Because here's the problem. That's how you actually show you know what you're talking about. You put out thousands and thousands of hours talking and writing about the game, and people can tell you can't fake it after that long. Like, people can tell if you know what you're talking about, if you have a way of thinking about the game, if what you say makes sense, if you can make predictions, if you can reassess what's happening. Like that, I always thought they were actually pretty lazy in that sense, that they just had other areas nailed already, and so they didn't bother making that content. So I don't have a problem with the content existing. I do agree, though, it doesn't really feel like on brand for them overall. I would say, by the way, just for comedic purposes, this is where I'll insert a comment by Anders Bloom, a formerly great commentator. Nah, he's still a pretty good commentator. But basically, he once said on Twitter something, because you know Anders does that thing where I used to say before, I know when he's high when he tweets. I've realised now his high tweeting has become all his tweeting. Like, he does it even now when he's now not mastered his high inner voice when not high, because I can't tell anymore, Mauisnake. So he did a tweet, I don't think this probably even was high, where he just said something like, I think it would be great if HLTV had a forum, a section where it's just every good content from the community. Could be like Thorin content, could be like this. And I was just like, oh my sweet summer child, like you just don't, you are aware, like they're the site that hates everyone else's content, you fucking idiot, that doesn't link to anything. Like, that's, you've literally suggested the exact opposite of what they were. That's like saying, Anders, like, I think fucking Coke should just open a bar with all the cool drinks as well, you know, like milkshakes and stuff like that. If it's not their shit, they're not going to be doing that. So even though, by the way, I do think in theory that would be a great idea, basically a better content aggregator than Reddit, I also think that's naive to ever imagine that's going to happen. So I would just say I would combine the two. I would have it separate so you can have like sort of a pared down version that's just if you want the news headlines. And I'd have its own section, and potentially if you actually think the people you have there are good, have them do more content. Have them do, because there's always space for content and they don't do actually very much on that site.
Yeah, they could easily employ a lot of the people we were talking about earlier about
Sure.
how there's so many people on YouTube that are making great analytical
Yes.
content, and then and hire them for one-offs, and then if something is really popular on the HLTV site, then just keep hiring them for more work. And
let me give you an example. Like, let's say that they have a tournament and one of the newer players, so it could have been a few months ago when Axile won that first MVP, right? If he wins the MVP, then the next week you have one of these guys you're talking about make a video like, here's what Axile does in Gambit. For HLTV's audience, that seems like a slam dunk. Surely, and not everyone's just a moron on the forum. Surely some people also want to see like more depth to the content they're already viewing, you know? There's got to be someone.
You do dig through the forums. There's one good reply out of every 10.
Oh, it's garbage. The ratio is mental now. The signal noise is unreal, isn't it? Like, at this point in time, trying to get sense out of the HLTV forums is like I'm in like a low fucking like radio coverage area with a really old radio when I've got a dial and I'm trying to like fucking crack the safe and like get in like I'm picking up words, fragments of things I thought, is that English? And I'm just, like, at the end you're just like, what am I fucking wasting my time for? I'm just talking to myself, get out of mirror.
I've just resigned to it being a comedy thread for me.
Right.
Like I'm just
there you go.
View it for jokes only.
There you go.
Reading the HLTV forums is like watching a demo of a tier 4 team that they do 99% garbage, but then you get one strat from them that's amazing, and you're just like, But do I really want to go through another demo like that and try to just find that one little gem? The answer is no. The answer is just no. I usually actually use sport mode on HLTV now, and I just don't want to see the forums in general.
You know what? I'll actually tell you one rare thing I do enjoy about HLTV.org, because obviously that's pretty shocking, right? Well, I'm going to say, here's the angle, right? Which is just because I am just a human at the end of the day, and I can be quite petty like a lot of humans with an ego can. Here's the thing, right? Obviously, it sucks if there's all threads about you being an idiot and all horrible things. But if it's actually one of the people you don't like in esports and they make a thread that is allowed on the front page where people are just brutally tearing this motherfucker apart, how they look, how they talk. Listen, I can't lie, I chuckle. I sometimes open those ones for a little laugh. Listen, it's petty, but like I say, because you just think to yourself, holy shit, how is this even allowed? Like, they're going in on these motherfuckers. Like, especially, by the way, anyone who's talented who works events. Like, it's the only place you'll ever see them get really flamed. Like, even Reddit doesn't go as hard usually as these motherfuckers do.
Yeah, that is true.
I know it's a pathetic reason, but I do. I get my Schadenfreude out of it, you know, like.
For other people that are just more fans, if you just hate a player, just try to search them up on the HLTV forums. You'll find a thread about them.
There'll be a million.
You can dogpile on the hate trading. Yeah.
Dude, people unironically hate on Simple on that site, like currently, so you know what I mean? Like that's how I knew when he actually had become the ultimate GOAT, by the way, was the joke was, it's like that Ents Katowice round from 29, it's like if he only kills 3 people in the 1v4, then he sucks because he didn't kill the last guy. I was like, right, you've actually ascended when that's the fucking standard now, like, that is such an unreasonable standard for any human to have. Okay, so now we're going to go, and it's the last one actually, so it's my ugly one. So this might actually shock people, but not really. Like, it'll initially seem shocking. But I purposely picked this for ugly, not bad. This is where the distinction is. I actually put Glaive signing a 3-year deal with Astralis. Now, the reason, as I said, it isn't bad, because here's the problem. If you know how long Glaive's career has been, you have to remember he played at the end of Source and was in like reasonably good teams, etc. He's played a long time of pro Counter-Strike. Add in, he's literally had health issues. People forget, they think it's only Device in Astralis because they forget the story, because it was at the beginning of when Glaive joined Astralis. He's had his lung collapse on him multiple times at LANs, where he had to just leave the venue and go to the hospital, basically. So this is someone who's had his own issues. He obviously last year literally got a doctor's note to get medical exhaustion leave, basically, from Astralis. Then you add in he's having a family now. So if I look at like the real world aspect of Glaive and what the impact of his career has been, I don't blame him if I basically privately knew the choice was this: either A, I retire, or B, I do this. I sign with Astralis again. They give me loads of money. I've got security. I know they won't fire me after a year. I can maybe, I can go like 90% instead of 100%. I can have a family life. I stay in one spot. I maybe even get a little bit of say in who joins the team. Basically, I get to just kind of like controlled write my ticket on the way out of the scene, basically. If you give me that choice, that's why I put it as ugly. Because if I take into consideration like the other factors, I understand why he did it. The reason it's ugly, though, is because, mate, if you want to talk about what could have been, man alive, like him to own any of about 5 or 6 teams is like, it's like wet dream shit if you're a fucking analyst. Like, the potential of what these teams could have done, in the same way as adding a player like a Rops or a Device as a star player could take so many of these teams maybe to number 1. This could have been the move. Put it this way, teams like G2, like I've alluded to on a lot of these shows, they were almost half banking on doing this move. Like, they were sort of in the back of their mind, like, right, and if it doesn't go well at the major, we can still get Glaive. And like, that option isn't on the table for a lot of people now. And so it kind of, for me, I personally don't think Astralis is actually going to have like a killer lineup for the next few years. I imagine he's just going to be kind of like leading like a tier 2 team. So to me, it's just kind of a bummer, because like the what if of what it could have, like this could have been like a game breaking move across the scene that could have totally changed, like, balance of power, all the fucking cliches, reversal of fortune, all that garbage. Like, this could have totally changed who the best team is for the next 3 years, but I don't think it will.
I'm glad we get to keep pitting Device versus Astralis Core, though. That's the one narrative that I know is going to hold up still. But that being said, you are right, Thorin, that it would have been amazing to see Glaive join Complexity, for example. That would have just been, there's so many different teams here. G2, for example. I mean, what could these kind of international rosters that could have used him? Now it's always just the big what if, where we have to just keep thinking, is Glaive, like, we all know I think it's been generally accepted that Glaive is the best IGL in all of CSGO, but there's still kind of a tinge of, is that just because his personnel was as good as it was as a core?
course,
And if he gets to retain the core, then we have to just think that we just have to keep assuming that he's really, really good. But maybe the input from Dupree and Zipnix was always so great that it made his job so easy. And we could have seen, can he raise other players from the doldrums of whatever they're in right now to new heights, or would he have actually taken a great roster like G2 and fallen off? You know, like there's so many routes that we're never going to get to explore now, because he's just going to be surrounded by an Astralis core that really is going to be we're going to sandbag it a little bit. I mean, it's just going to be, we're going to play some softball, because it's never going to be as good as what it was in 2018, 2019. It's just not I just see no possibility of that happening. And we're always going to give Glaive a pass now for the next 3 years. And that's something that is just less exciting than a completely new roster for him.
I think that one silver lining, though, is with watching how pieces of the Astralis puzzle are just leaving now and they're signing younger people. I think that if for some reason they do completely sign on like 4 youngsters and just at one Glaive, I think that his whole career has been coming up and like fighting against the odds and winning tournaments that they shouldn't have any right to win, or making deep runs. I think that if there is a world where he is like, I mean, he is the GOAT IGL, but if there is some world where he can take a completely different lineup to the top, that would also be really, really neat. But I think it is worrying to me that, you know, the vibes of the signing feels kind of like, you know, I'm securing a deal for my family and making sure that I have a secure job. But part of me just hopes that he can take another lineup to the top.
Put it this way, in the same way as people know by now, because I actually established, I'm proud to say myself in Counter-Strike, I established years ago with people like Smiths that if the first thing they tell you is like, oh, he's a great guy, it's the same as if they tell you about some girl you haven't met. She has a nice personality. It's like, you wouldn't have said that as the first thing if she was also smoking hot, like fucking incredible shape, rich. Like, you'd have gone with those first and then you'd maybe mention it. So similarly, right, in this scenario, dude, I think, in my opinion, this is why I actually am wondering if any of those other proposed moves go through. Because as far as I could tell from all those moves, the only one I actually believe genuinely was done potentially completely is maybe if Zipnix does go to FaZe. I could believe that is a move where it's like, it's not just the money, like, yeah, I also want to be on this team, I think it could be better. Every other move sounds like that. Like Device's thing, oh, well, you know, I wanted to live in Sweden. Why are you saying that's the first thing? You're supposed to start by saying, you know, I believe Nip can build a major winning project. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, it also happens to be in Sweden, so it was easy to make the decision. Same thing for all the other moves. Like, you want it to be like, if Glaive really believed, this is why you know he doesn't, that this was like, you know, I'm just going to be building it. You'd start like that. What you'd say is, well, listen, you know, I've been in different teams. I was even in the wilderness for a while in Counter-Strike. I know what it's like, and, you know, it's different. You never know when a team's going to click. So here at Astralis, you know, they understand my vision and the way I work, and, you know, I think if they give me the right young pieces, one day I could develop the next device. You know, there's an angle you could have gone with for like PR that would sound like he really believed in the project and he wanted to start over. But like what actually he said just made it sound like, yeah, I've got the bag, lol. It's like, all right. I mean, I guess, like, good for you, mate. But like, I don't get to have any of that bag. So to me, I'd rather watch you be sick at Counter-Strike in the game, you know. I'm selfish in that way, Glaive, believe it or not. And also, I'll even say this, like, part of me low-key does also feel like I'm a bit cheated for exactly what you're saying, Mauisnake, which is this. If we're going to do that whole thing where like Carrigan and Glaive took totally different approaches to their careers, where Carrigan goes wherever is necessary. Now, he always tries to have some pieces there, but he goes and he gambles every time that it could completely blow up in his face. And you see how harsh fans are to him already because he hasn't won a major. Like, he gambles his reputation every time he goes to a new location. And hence why, when he then gets them to be a top team, most people in the community give him mad props. The real problem, it's not like Glaive never did that. It's like, it's like this would have been the perfect time to give that one try. And I tell you what, if he'd have ever gone somewhere, by the way, speaking of the NFL topic earlier, if he'd have gone somewhere, and by the way, it wasn't a team where he tried to do the Astralis style, he tried to be like a mid-round in IGL, I think he even could have like nailed that fucking argument forever. Like, if he'd have succeeded with like a FaZe team of his own, mate, there wouldn't even be a discussion then. You would just nail all the narratives and you just win. You just win in everyone's mind, you know. Not that that matters to him, but, you know, as like an observer, it would have been cool to test, wouldn't it?
It's impossible to fight 4 majors argument right now with him. So he's pretty much secured his position as the GOAT IGL. If there were any more doubt, if Device were more of a hyper carry, or Careby was, for example, and it didn't look so tactically sound, then maybe people would throw some shade or some doubt at Glaive. But it's so impossible to do that right now, that he's just so secure right now that he can just stay on Astralis, rake in the 3 years at whatever it is, and that's pretty much that. And he doesn't need to. There's no naysayers against Glaive, really. There's just no reason for him to take that kind of risk in probably his eyes.
Yeah, I think I'm excited to see what he does. But again, yeah, if he just cashing in a paycheck, then I guess Astralis fans will be happy that he's there. But I'm sure the rest of the world will just be praying that something happens and he can go somewhere else potentially. But yeah, I agree.
This video was kindly supported by Kris with a K, Lager15, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Shenlong, Travis Goff, Wisetown, Zachary Carter, Zack Schmidt, Adam Ochs, Alexander Rao, Animosity, Butt Pounder 420, Kris, ErikHillestad, Hades, Jdubs, Jensen Goh, John Shelton, Joseph Ginsburg, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, and a special thanks goes out to both Jerky's Minion and Joshua Gardner. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you want to ask one of those questions for my video AMA. Do you want teasers? Find out who the guests are for my upcoming shows. Maybe you even want to be a nerd having a long 2 or 3 hour discussion with me about anything on one of those video discussions. Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Skrilluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.